It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello friends, I am Rob, and this is my State of the Dungeon address. This is for the game, which took place on the 30th of September in the year 2021. The game was 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons in the Gooey Cube, in the Darkest Dream, the first part of the Red Star Rising campaign. And all players were in attendance, including the newest edition, Vince, who is playing as Ventov Drungan, the son of the dwarves Stoof and Lena. So, the group was picking up action where they had left off up at the gambling tents, where they had just seen off a pair of Sarth. And they were, kind of collecting themselves when up came Borag and Ventov. Borag grumbled about them having to beat the Sarth belligerent, unconscious. Although, Haranen picked one up and threw him out bodily without having to beat him up, but the others pummeled him into unconsciousness. So no blood was shed, which is good. But he decided that they could use a hand since they seemed to be getting into so much trouble. So he gave Ventov over to the group to join in, which made them happy. Ventov is an enthusiastic member of the group and was looking forward to doing something other than wrestling locals for coin, which he was doing along with, as kind of a ringer when people had seen enough of Borag and Kalnase not to know that they didn't want to wrestle them. They would often get thrown up against Ventov, who is himself a very skilled warrior. So, with that satisfied, the group decided that they were going to go back to the south end of the encampment where they had left off at the beast wagons and progress around the perimeter of the camp again. Now, you'll have to excuse me, some of these events may be a little out of order. This is a few days after the game, and my brain isn't what it used to be. So, they did go along by the Cellar's Row to kind of see how things were going, and they encountered a bunch of kids who were poking at a hole, looked like a groundhog hole or woodchuck hole, trying to bait something to come out. Now, of course, the group wasn't too keen on the idea of some burrowing animal coming up in the middle of Cellar's Row, and they moved up to intercept just as a throng of giant centipedes broke out. Well, turns out giant centipedes aren't all that tough, and the group is more than capable of smashing centipedes and playing whack-a-mole, basically, with centipedes. So they comfortably slaughtered these centipedes and put an end to that threat, finding out that there were actually burrowing warrens all around throughout the underneath the sod of the field that the Carnivalle is set up at. Smedley was particularly happy. Smedley, of course, is one of the heroes of the story, and he was so happy to get a gore-stained chunk of centipede that he was able to chase after girls with. He apparently had caught one, pinned her down, and rubbed centipede guts all over her. So that made him very happy. Smedley is a monster. So the group decided they were going to go back up to the north end of the camp and kind of start going around it. And to do that, the first place they went to is the archery range and the test of arms field. And when they went up there, they got to see Cray the Blade, one of the foremost warriors in the group, who was taking on a local at knife throwing. And Cray just edged him out in a very, very dramatic flourish. And the locals grumbled that Cray is unbeatable, because he is very good. And effectively, Brayan, the old blind monk who often attends these fields, recommended that if they didn't like their chances against Cray, maybe they could try against these young Hanataz who just happened to come along at the right time. And this one fellow who had just lost to Cray in knife throwing snarled out that, yeah, he would take on three of the Hanataz brats. He would take on one in archery. His friend would take on one, or no. The guy who spoke was not the guy who threw the daggers, but he had a nice bow on him, and he offered to take on one in archery. His friend with the red hair would take on one with knife throwing, and his friend Big Ned would take on somebody in hand-to-hand. And the group kind of picked over, and Glenn took up the challenge in archery, kind of a no-brains competition, because he's got a long bow and everything, and he's good with it. Ventov basically let Haranen have the choice if he wanted to, dice off for it or paper, rock, scissors or whatever, but they just basically, Haranen, kind of stepped aside, and Ventov went in for that. And out of all the people who would do the knife throwing, who should step up but Crendon? So his nimbleness would come into play. So the first thing that was done was the knife throwing, and Crendon won on the final throw. It was pretty tense, not quite as tense as the match against. Obviously, the match with Cray was a little bit more dramatic, but Crendon showed that he's quite gifted, and he won the wager of 10 golds for the troop against the archer Worston. And then came Glyn and Worston's challenge, and my dice. Oh, my dice. It looked like it was a bit give and take at start, but then in the end, my dice shut down, and he didn't even hit the target on his final shot. So Glyn won that one pretty dominantly. And then came the hand-to-hand contest with Ventov against Big Ned, and this time the luck turned the other way. Ventov hit once, and then no more. And even though he delivered a sizable blow that would knock many a lesser man down with his one shot, he couldn't hit the big galoot with his further shots, and ended up getting taken down, as Big Ned himself was very strong, very powerful. So, Ventov got knocked out. He was brought back up, and it turned out that Vanessa was nice enough to heal the damage, because he only took 25% damage after being knocked out. Only 25% of the damage was real. So yeah, he had a loosened teeth as he got hit pretty hard, but he rallied pretty well. So they made sure that the troop ended up as they won 2, lost 1, so it's a net gain of 10 gold for the troop. Worston was not a happy camper. Big Ned was just kind of there. Saw them off. No real further challenges were coming, so they moved on to the wrestling ring. This, of course, is presided over by Kalnase and Borag, so they weren't expecting any trouble. But they were still greeted because Borag had a group of locals who wanted to have a tug of war, which, of course, is a contest, very provincial. It's something that all you need is a piece of rope or something to pull on, so it's widely seen as entertainment. And 2 fairly evenly matched groups can come down to a real test of who just has the staying power to keep pulling at this rope. And that's very much what happened in this. It was back and forth and back and forth, and again, sometimes the luck would be on the group side, and basically what it was just everybody made an athletics test to see what their contribution was to the overall effort. And I just summed them all up, compared them against, and everybody got to participate. So it was 6 on 6, with 6 of the big burly farm types against the 6 adventuring Hanataz. And it went through 6 rounds, and the groups were getting exhausted. I mean, you literally are throwing all of your effort into a good tug of war, and both sides were fairly even for much of it. But in round 5, the group lost ground, and in round 6, they were all rolling at disadvantage as the fatigue was setting in of throwing everything they had into the contest. And I, for whatever reason, was rolling 15s and 16s relatively easily, so the last time they lost, which was unfortunate. The group got to taste a little defeat without anybody dying for it. So as the group was resting, they got to look about themselves and see some of the other events that were going on. They got to see they had an encounter with the man in black, rather attractive-looking, I don't know. Anyhow, gray-haired fellow who his name is Zixgramus, and they surrounded him and talked to him. He's an itinerant wizard who was investigating some odd magical resonances going on throughout the camp. Turns out he had some familiarities with the Hanataz, having been among their people and helping them in the past, but wasn't currently doing that. He was currently just checking on something that he felt that was a ill-intended magic. And he warned them about that, and they let him go on his way. Actually, they sent him off to the old well where they found the ruins from the old necromancer's dungeon, which had him excited, and he went off in that direction. They later went and talked to Vestia, who recognized Zixgramus as a kind of a troublemaker. Not so bad for the Hanataz for the most part, although he seems very, very curious about their unique magics. He's one not really to be trusted, so if he shows up again, they should probably go and tell Borag or Vestia or Skizig, one of the people who are the elders of the troop, if they see him again. So they then, with lots of fun jibes with the insult golem and Ventov being excitable. Of course, another incident that occurred was the Battle of the Dragon Punchers. The Dragon Punchers are a group of children who are troublemakers and have been plaguing the Carnivalle since day one. Well, they seem to have stepped up their game. They had already caused that problem with the boar pen that caused the boars to break loose, and the party had to slaughter 2 of them, and yeah. Well, this time they were going into the tall tent with ill intents. 2 of their leaders went up to the flap and threw smoke bombs into the place, which might not have really freaked out anybody because the locals would have thought, oh, it's just part of the act. But the group wasn't having any of that. So they started chasing down children. Now, to be fair, Crendon decided not to go nab children, and he just started to entertain, to distract the crowd so that they wouldn't be upset with the fact that carnies are now, hauling off children. The crowd is pretty tired of these Dragon Puncher kids anyhow. So they weren't getting any negative publicity for the most part, which left Ventov and Glyn and Haranen and Brandel, to a certain extent, and, Brandel's a little special. We'll get to her in a second. But Vanessa all went to try and chase down the children. They found something interesting. If they could capture the children, they could shake them down because the kids had stuff. Yes, they found some smoke bombs that they can use. They found a couple of interesting, a little dragon sculpture and things that Vanessa's claiming as a trophy. And they escorted a lot of these kids out of the Carnival altogether. But eventually, the leader of the group was captured herself, and she ended up coughing up some kind of an interesting potion, slip and slide oil, which the group might find an interesting use for at some point. But they forced them out of the camp, which works for the rest of the event. Should be a lot smoother now that those children are gone. It seems like the Dragon Punchers have been bested, at least many of their leaders. A couple who had gone to ground might still be there, but it won't be the major instigators anymore. So that was the Battle of the Dragon Punchers. The one thing that happened in this battle, though, again, Crendon was trying to make it so there's no problem going on, and Brandel tried to help too. That is, she tried using her prestidigitation to take care of the smoke and have some lights flickering through it so it looked like part of the display. So I had her make a performance roll to see how well she wedded her magics in along with the performance. Natural 1. So she accidentally concocted effectively a similar effect to a stinking cloud in the smoke. causing a lot of really nauseated goers in the tent. So that was something that happened. And then after that, she decided she was going to run off because she was not up to the performance aspect of the whole thing. So that was fun. So the group went off to have a drink, which was perfectly fine. But then eventually they saw some people that didn't look like they were having a very good time. These people were apparently paladins of the god Warduke, the god of guardians, protectors, and the like. Generally seen as pretty decent people, but these paladins were outraged. Led by a woman in gleaming armor. They were denouncing the entire Carnivalle as evil, and it must be torn down. And the group went up to engage. Vanessa started off, but not the most argumentative person is Vanessa, so the paladin kind of wrote her off as being a bit touched, which, you know. But the rest of them started to put up arguments on what was going on, how this Carnivalle was almost at an end anyhow, so tearing it down now would do no good. The paladins didn't want to hear it. Arguments that they were there legally and with the permission of the elders. Paladins didn't want to hear that either. No arguments that were professed were really seeming to get any purchase, and eventually it just annoyed the lady paladin at the head of the group, so she sent her 2 men off to go and smash booths and tents and start to force them to leave if that's what it took. And that's where we stopped. The group is kind of strung out on how they're going to prevent damage done to their Carnivalle. And it looks like the group is heading right over towards the 2 paladins look like they're going after the Tent of Illusions.